Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. We worship you. We commune with you. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. We welcome you. Welcome your presence. Guide us, lead us, direct us. Make our lives more and more glorifying to you in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. You can be seated. If you take this mic down a bit, it would be good. I referred to it right at the end of last week. By the way, welcome everybody. Welcome to you who are live streaming, or you who are going to watch this later. Yeah, we're way too hot here. This mic's got to go down. On page 112, there, that's much better. Page 112, it has sources where I gathered information and put it together in here. And those are all good books to get because I just took pieces out of them and put it in. And the reason I did it that way is if I was going to want to resell this, I would have to footnote every little thing I got from whatever book, and it's just like, I just wanted to make a helpful manual that helped people a bit. Someone put me onto this book. It was Crystal last week put me onto this book, and it is a very good book. I haven't been in it very deep. It's called The Divinity Code. It's really good. It's got a lot of information, especially on the things that are pictures or types in dreams. I think they said they've got 3,000 of them in here or something like that, 3,000 metaphors. So there's a lot of stuff in here that it would be a good companion book to get. If you get some of the others, get this one too, and it will help fill in some of the cracks and holes on information to help you. See, what else did we need to cover right from the beginning? I don't think we have much. Does everybody have a copy of the dream? If you don't, we have some up here. I didn't see anybody else's hand go up. Oh, one more. Could you take this one back, Abby? Yeah. Thank you. So I gave it to you last week. So what we're going to do is we're going to approach this, and everybody's going to kind of develop their own little style of how God uses you to interpret dreams. We're going to approach this so you see how I approached this when I got it and what I did with it. So you want to keep your fingers in the first 6 pages. We're not going to go to the dream interpreted because I don't go there right away when I interpret. We're going to start specifically on page 2 because we're going to look at this. Now, you probably went through it and got the interpretation and everything else. You just don't know what it applies to yet. But I'm going to go through it like we've never seen this before. And how would we look at this? What would we do? How would we start taking this apart? Okay, the first thing you do when you get a dream or someone hands you a dream is what? I even have a step before that one. If I have a dream or someone hands me a dream, if they hand it to me, it's already written. But if I have a dream, first thing you need to do, is this a God dream? If it's not a God dream, you're wasting your time to write it down, to even go any further. First thing you do, you have to determine how God speaks to you, and you'll get that. That's kind of a trial and error thing. There's a number of helps in the book, and we went over those already, to kind of give you a feel of how does God do this with me. But that's the first thing you need to know is this God or not? Because if it's not God, it's a waste of time. Second thing you need to do, if you got the dream personally, second thing you need to do, write it down with as absolutely much detail as you can. That's how it works for me. So I just teach what works for me. Absolutely as much detail as you can. Write it down. Now, when it's handed to you, like this one was handed to me. So first thing I did before I started reading it was, okay, Lord, I'm going to read this. If this is of you, it needs a witness with my spirit. If it's not, let me know right from the beginning and it'll just go in the garbage. Not going to waste any time on it trying to figure anything out if it's not you. Because the contents of the dream does not tell you if it's God or not. I've had people bring dreams that are purely demonic, and they're really detailed and actually quite long. So the content of the dream is not, look at it this way. You don't find God by, well, this is what was told to me. You think that's God or not? You don't find God by the content. You've got to find God in your spirit to know, does this witness with me or does this not? Content is irregardless. Because it might be something you like, it might be something you hate. Could be God either way. So, well, I read it and I thought it was pretty good, so it's probably God, huh? And it probably has nothing to do with it. You got to feel in your spirit. You've got to know how God speaks to you. So the first thing I did is I said, Lord, I'm going to read this thing through. As I'm going, you need to witness this to me or no. So as I read it through, it just felt more and more like, yeah, it was peaceful inside of me. If I lose my peace, and it's like, the more I read, even though the words might be great, I'm not looking for the words. I'm looking for what is my spirit reacting like to the words. So as I'm reading it through, I'm just letting the words go through my brain, but I'm paying more attention to my spirit of, is it peaceful with this, or is this kind of like I don't know. Which one is it? Once I determine, you know what, this could be God, then I'll go back and read it again. And this one was easy because it's short. So page 2. So now we're the second time in reading it. First time was like, okay, I think this could be God. So let's read it through, like, what can we see? The first thing is don't go for the details. Go for the big picture, and if Kevin can bring up that dream interpretation thing with the setting and all this, that, and the other, so we can have that. We're looking for big stuff to begin with. We're not looking for details. Anybody remember what page? 26, 28? 36. And like I said last week, I have some of those in an expanded form. I didn't bring any tonight. In an expanded form to where you've got the setting. It looks kind of like on page 4 and 5 of the dream I handed out. It's got a little room between each item so I can write things in. Just makes it easier. So we're looking for the big picture of this whole thing. And the big picture is established by those indicators. So we'll read through it. I don't know if you can flip back and forth between this and the dream or not, but that's up to you, however you want to do it, Kevin. So we start. First paragraph. We were in the modular for a service. The building was full. I was standing in the back in the kitchen. Now, this is not me. This is Matt's dream. So it was him from his perspective. It was a slightly different layout with all chairs facing what was the south wall as the sanctuary ran north and south. Kitchen setup was slightly different too. Okay? 2-3 things immediately stand out to me when I read that. Because God speaking in a language that makes sense to me, because I'm going to be the receiver of the dream, made sense to Matt too once I explained it, but he couldn't get it until he handed it to me. He dreamt it for me. But some of the things are interpreted by his colloquial language, and we'll get to them when we get there. But a couple first things that stand out to me. Modular. It's where we started the church in the house to begin with, and we were in there just a little over a year. But it's easy to cut bait and run when it's your house. You know, we started church, had service for a few years, and just quit, and nothing lost, because nothing was really invested. Once you get a loan from the bank, once you put $50,000 of your own money into it, now it's getting real. So the modular to me says this is when the church got real in Minnesota. So it's the beginning of the church. So the modular is speaking something of the church. The sanctuary is speaking also of the church, obviously, but it's faced the wrong direction. That's just a big thing. It's like, yeah, that's not going the wrong direction. So something with the church. Remember what the definition to south is. Just you don't have to have the full one. Don't look it up in your book. We'll just start memorizing some of this stuff. South is a direction of disfavor. It's not good. And it even shows up in our language. Which direction is this situation going, north or south? Oh, it's going south. Well, what does that tell you? It's not good. It's going bad. So dream interpretations kind of just follows that same thought. So something with the church is off. That's the big picture of the first paragraph. This has to do with the church, and something's off. Okay? Second paragraph. Vern shared that they were moving, that when God moved them here to Minnesota, they asked him for the house he wanted for them, and said this one they were moving to was it. I was thinking, now this is Matt was thinking how perfect the house setup and location already was for, the setup and location was already for their current house. So I was making the announcement, not that the church is moving, that we are personally moving locations. Of course, the church, the modular, was on our property. So if we're personally changing locations, the church is going to change locations. Now, the other part that stands out to me there is this. Well, we prayed when we moved up here, and we thought he gave us the property he wanted us to have. Now we're into this thing a ways, and now all of a sudden, we found what God has for us. Either we missed it to begin with, or we're missing it now. You can't have it both ways. And that is kind of just a little principle for Christian life. Well, I felt God told us this, and 2 years later, he changed his mind. This is going a different direction now. No, either you missed it to begin with, or you're missing it now. God did not change his mind. Always kind of keep that in the back. So the dreamer, this is interesting, that last sentence, he's dreaming this dream, but his brain is engaged, and that's how it works. It's got to go through your brain, or you're not going to remember it. And his brain's engaged with what the Lord's showing him, and his thought comes out, that seems odd because this seems good for what we're trying to do. So even in his brain, it's going, I'm not sure about this. He asked me, that would be me, he's talking about me, the he is me. I asked Matt to go outside and help Dean, who was struggling wrangling up all the kids. They were playing in the yard, and one of them was stuck in a big oak tree, and Dean had just got them down. Dean had the whitest sneakers on you could imagine, and I had to borrow them when I went outside. I tried to put them on, or a pair of them, when going outside, but couldn't get them on, so I forced them on and flattened the backs. I noticed the sky was really turning stormy and windy. So we're not going to go into the details. There's a lot of details right there. We're not going to go into the details. I told Matt to go help Dean. Okay, so who's Matt? Well, Matt's on the board. That's kind of what differentiates him from anybody else in the congregation. Well, what's the difference between Matt and somebody else? Well, Matt's on the board. Makes him responsible for some things. So I asked him to go help Dean. Well, who's Dean? Dean's on the board. So we're dealing with leadership now. I'm telling the leadership to do some things. We have a problem that's developed with children. Okay? So it's about the church, first paragraph. Something's off with the church. Okay? Second paragraph. The church is going to be directly affected by decisions Mary and I make in our personal lives. Big picture. Third paragraph. We already have trouble going on. There's trouble with children. There's problems. That's all you need to know in that paragraph for now. So we're just looking for what is the big thing that stands out. Fourth paragraph on page 2. Matt went back inside, and Vern was walking amongst the people who were all praying in tongues, and he was making his way back to me. He got next to me and said, "I have your back." Heidi was there praying for someone also, or was there praying for someone. That one's kind of a neutral. It's like, well, we're still trying to seek God, evidently. It's about all you get out of that. Unless you go to the details. We don't want to go to the details next. So we're still trying to seek God. Well, that can be good, I presume. The rest of it's not good, but that fourth paragraph, well, that could be all right. Then the scene switches. Scene number 2. Next thing I know, it's Mary and I in the kitchen looking out the east-facing window, but it was in the southeast direction. The sanctuary was running north and south. They were looking out an east window, but they were looking like this out the window to the southeast, okay? Read on. I said we better pray against that. What was that? Well, in the last third paragraph at the end, he noticed the sky was turning stormy and windy. So now they're looking out a window, and he's telling Mary, we better pray against that. And the circling clouds, the winds, the lightning. She said yes. She got everyone's attention and then had everyone look out the western-facing window, but in the southwest direction. So this sanctuary runs north and south. So they were at a window in the kitchen looking this way, and he said, "There's a storm. We better pray against that." She said yes. So she gathered the people, went to a window on this side, and looked that way and prayed. Anything odd about that? It's like, yeah, that's off. So let's read on. I know this because it was less cloudy and stormy over that direction. It wasn't as many clouds and storms. But you could see the sun setting behind the clouds. So there was clouds, sun was setting. It was also a different color. Of course, this way where the storm was, I talked to him, it was very gray, very dark. That way, where the sun was setting, was orange and red, very vibrant colors, which would be kind of normal for a sunset behind clouds. I also thought it was odd she had them look out a different window that wasn't as bad, but you could still see daylight. So we're praying about the storm, but we're not looking at the storm. We're looking at something that's much more calm. Big picture of that. Well, who's Mary? Well, Mary is co-pastor with me. She's my wife. Since we've got a dual thing going on here, we got the church and our personal property. We're not changing the church. We're moving our personal property. Keep that in mind. So it's a personal decision we're making that's going to affect the church. So Matt, who is on the board, he's one of the leadership, is trying to alert Mary, which to me it'd be Mary and I. He's trying to say, there is a problem here. We need to address the problem. So the leadership is seeing something's wrong. This is not good. There's a storm coming. We need to address this. Mary misdirects that whole input. Well, that too doesn't seem right. So I wonder what that was about. So again, we've had 4 paragraphs in the first scene. 3 of them were like, yeah, that doesn't seem right. 1 paragraph we've read now in the second scene, and that's really like, yeah, that really doesn't seem right. Let's read the second paragraph on page 3. Just then the sirens went off, and everyone was scrambling to get out of the modular and look for cover. Heidi was carrying Isla, that's their youngest. I was looking for things to grab. My keys and phone stood out to me. And then he had to find Grant, which is their oldest. This is when I recalled I had flattened and wrecked and dirtied Dean's bright white tennis shoes when I went outside. So the thing that happened in the first scene, he really remembered it here, like, oh yeah, I did that to his tennis shoes. The last part of that paragraph, it ended with us looking in the big yard for a place to hide right when a tornado was starting to take shape. There's nothing positive in that paragraph. That is a negative paragraph all the way through. So we're trying to deal with something inside the building when an outside alert comes, which empties the building. And empties the building because a storm's coming, people get hurt, things like that, so they're all trying to hide. Scene 3. The lot or the property where we're living on, where the modular's at, was on a dirt road that ran parallel with the sanctuary north and south. There was a road on the east side with cornfields across the road, the other side of the road. There was an old white worn-down farmhouse to the northeast. It had an oak tree to play on, and there was a forest to the southeast, and corn was straight east. I recall it being open fields to the west, because see, they're out in the yard now. They're trying to find a place to hide. Open fields to the west, that's the direction Mary had us look out the window. And he said, so it's open fields immediately, and then off in the distance you can see corn and trees in the distance. Now that part of the dream, the early part all exists. It's he's dreaming about something that's real. That scene is not real. There's no dirt road that runs beside our property, north and south, right on the east side of our property. The old farmhouse and all that, none of that's there. So this is a scene that he's seeing while trying to take cover that isn't there. So God's trying to show something different. That's the way you look at that. It's like, that's not even there. So what is he trying to say in this? He's kind of like switched the subject almost a little bit, but yet we're still in the same place. So now let's go to, we'll jump Matt's observations. Go to page 4 with me. So there's what I've seen in the big thing. So if I'm going to go to, and sometimes what I'll do is I'll go to the last part first. On page 6, the big picture. And don't necessarily read those comments yet. The big picture of how we I read it through for the second time now. I'm seeing a bunch of stuff here I do not like. Something's wrong. We have no intention of moving our personal property, but then rarely in a dream is it a literal interpretation. This is a picture of something. The whole dream surrounds around, we had already decided to move locations. And the whole dream was built on that basis, which is a little unusual because we have not decided that. So it's like, okay, so God has stepped into the future. Have you ever had anybody tell you they had a dream or a vision where God gave them 2, 3 different scenarios and let it play out for them and showed them where it would end? You ever had that? No? It's really interesting when God does that. I've had it happen numerous times with people who've come to me about it, and I've also heard other ministers talk about it. And it goes back again to, if you choose this, this is where that path will go. If you choose this or this, that's where those paths will go. God says, you've got the choice. What are you going to do? Which way are you going to go? This one kind of comes from the angle of, we already made the choice to move. Well, it's not a physical move, so what in the world is he talking about? It has to do with the church. It's a personal life decision that's going to directly affect the church and the church people. And since we decided to make the move, everything's going wrong. In the dream, everything's going wrong. Congregation's facing the wrong way. It's like there's trouble outside with the children. Mary's struggling to find direction, how to pray. It's just, everything's wrong in this dream. Big picture. So back up to page 4. The setting, well, that was my property. The environment went from inside the building that was pretty nice to a tornado trying to wipe everybody out. I mean, it kind of just progressed the wrong direction. So it started out okay and then just went south, so to speak. There were different scenes. Each scene, the reason you want to know that is each scene can be handled as a separate dream, so to speak. It's a separate piece of information, and they all tie together. Now, these scenes were all on the property, built around the modular. Most of the time, when I get different scenes in a dream, if I'm dreaming it, they are totally unrelated. I can be in Washington, D.C. in one scene and on the farm where I grew up in the second scene. And God is, they're all tied together. It's one message, but it needs to be interpreted differently. Sometimes an entire scene can be negative, and the next one you interpret positive. So you handle each scene a little bit like a fresh dream. Even though they're all tied together, there's going to be one message that flows through all of them. It's kind of like a fresh dream, so you want to keep that in mind when you do get to deep interpretation. This one, it was all flowing together, so this one's easy. Daytime or nighttime, it was daytime, close to sunset time. We knew that by the window out the west. Were directions involved? Yep, absolutely. Right or left indicators. I talked to him about it. He said the thing that stuck out to me in the third scene was the road going north and south, and then the placement of the stuff on the road. The house would have been over here, the old farmhouse, cornfields across the road there, and then there was a green forest down this direction. He said, in the dream, I didn't really think of it like left or right. It was just, I'm looking to the east, and there's the placement of the stuff. So left and right, not really. Maybe, but not really. So we're not going to put any weight on left or right indicators. Up or down, the oak tree, trying to get the kids down from the oak tree. Overall dream, color or black and white. He said it was mostly color, but they were pale colors. They were muted. He said the only things that were really bright was my shirt and Dean's shoes. I had a lime green shirt on, and he had bright white tennies. He said that was the only two things that were bright outside. Now, the third thing was the vividness of the orange and red setting sun. Everything else, he said it was in color, but it was really a dingy color, which means it's leaning more towards, it's kind of caught between an informational, prophetic, whatever dream, that realm, or a warning dream. It's in between here. It's not really bright colors, but it's not all black and white. It's in color, but they're just kind of gloomy looking colors. So you place it on the spectrum then. If you read the book, it talks about there's a spectrum in colors. Well, even in the physical, there's a spectrum in colors. You got the color spectrum. So you pick in the overall color scheme where it kind of fits, and it helps you interpret it. So it's from God. He's giving us information, but it's also kind of, there's some warnings mixed in with it because it leans that way. Location, my personal property and the modular. So there's two things being addressed here. Our personal life and our personal decisions, and the church, because the modular represents the church. People, there's 5 of us named, all kinds of people there, but there's 5 of us named. You want to write those down because you want to try to figure out what the people that we know who they are in the dream, what do they stand for? They represent something. Was there any forms of transportation in it? No. Nobody got on a motorcycle. Nobody got into a bus. There was no transportation in this dream. Genealogical indicators. I didn't know this was one until I started getting into the details, because I couldn't figure out what in the world is this applying to. Mary and I are moving location on something. So we are changing something major in our life. That's what moving location means. You're changing something major. Couldn't figure out what it was. It's like, what in the world? We have no plans to change anything major, but yet God is showing, if you change this and then go to the congregation and try to say, here's where we're going, this will be the outcome. And it's like, well, we don't want to do that. This is a bad outcome. What in the world is he talking about? Couldn't figure that out until I got into the details. So I just started interpreting the dream because I felt it was from God, so I started going into it. When I got to the third scene and the farmhouse and the dirt road, it just went, and I went, oh, there it is. So when we get there, I'll tell you why that worked that way for me. The time indicator was in there. It was the age of Heidi and the children. He said they look exactly like they look now. They're not older, they're not younger, they're just like they are right now. Whenever you have that in a dream, that's usually your time indicator. Most of the time, the people are younger or older because they're representing something. Like in the Sandra Bullock dream, she was much younger than she is right now because she was representing young people. They were that age, so they're still representing things, but that, I believe, is the time indicator. He's saying right now you're deciding something, major change in your personal life that's going to affect the church in a bad way. And I'm still shaking my head going, I don't get it. I don't see it. Personal involvement, yes, Matt was involved in observing. He was the dreamer. I was involved. It was our property. I was involved. Other people were involved, but the personal involvement, that's usually talking about the dreamer. Was the dreamer personally involved? He said, yes, he was personally involved, but from his perspective, most of the dream, he was just standing and watching it play out. He went outside, helped a little bit, came in and just kind of watched, talked to Mary a bit. So he was kind of involved, but he felt like he was observing. You say, what difference does that make? It doesn't as directly apply to him. It's going to affect him, but he's not the center focus. The ones who are the center focus, it will affect the greatest. Of course, if we change whole direction of the church, it's going to affect him. But it'll affect him more than the people sitting in the congregation because he's on the board. So he was highlighted out. Dean was highlighted out. And they stand out. Of course, Heidi would be affected. She'd be representing those who are closely related to the leaders or the ones on the board. She'd be affected too. So that's the picture of her. She's trying to support, she's trying to help, but it's going to affect her too. Everybody else who is kind of like, we know you're here, but you didn't stand out. All that doesn't mean that God's saying, oh, don't worry about it, it won't be a big deal. What he's saying is it's not going to affect you as dramatically as it will the ones who are focused on. Okay? Type of dream, calling and destiny. I didn't see that until I saw what the old farmhouse was about. That didn't never cross my mind because I didn't know what God was applying it to yet. The color tells me it's a mild warning dream, but it also can be a direction dream, give some answers, prophetic dream. It's saying where this will go if we choose to move locations. Yeah, this is going to go the wrong way. Do I think it's from God? Absolutely. Third heaven. I don't think it was first heaven. Matt had too much pizza before he went to sleep. I don't think it had a demonic source. I think it was third heaven. Complex symbolic. The reason you want to know that is because much of the meaning is hidden in the details. That's why there's so many of them. If it's a real short, simple dream, there's not a lot of details. So when you look at it, it's going to be much easier to see, oh, this is what God's trying to say. The more complex it gets, the deeper you have to dig into the details to go, oh. Like I said, I couldn't, it made no sense to me till I got to the third scene, because I didn't know the old farmhouse represented what it represented. I don't have that book memorized. It's like, well, let's go see where this is going. And when I read it, it's like, oh, my goodness, yeah, okay. Intrinsic or extrinsic, it's mostly extrinsic because Matt's dreaming about something that is not directly affecting his life. It's not on his property. It's part of the, it's dealing with the church he's part of, but it's mostly extrinsic. It's dealing with Mary and I, a decision we're looking to make that is going to move our personal life a different place, a different direction, which will have a direct impact on the church. Overall, symbolic, positive or negative. First two scenes are negative, very obviously. The third scene, once you see the details in it, it's mostly positive, but it also points out, because the third scene is a decision scene. That's why it's so different from what the first two. The first two scenes are real. They're like on our property. The third scene is so different, and you've got a north and a south direction Well, which way on that road you going to go? You can go south on that road, which everything's going to just keep going the wrong way, or you can go north on that road. That's the first thing you face. Matt looked east. First thing he saw is an old dirt road. I can go south on that road. I can go north on that road. What's it saying? You have a decision to make. Which way are you going to go? And then the details across the road give you some ideas of what's going to happen when you make the decision. So, big picture, Mary and I made a decision. This dream's coming from the perspective we already decided. Mary and I made a decision about our personal lives, our beliefs, our doctrinal position that had a direct negative effect on the church. So how did I come up with beliefs and doctrinal position? We're moving. We have no intention, have never thought of physically moving off of our property. So if God's trying to speak to us about something, he's not trying to say, don't move off your property or move off your property, because we've never entertained it, have no desire to do it, but yet here we already made the decision to do it. It directly affects the seating of the congregation. I was presenting it like, this is what we're doing, and all the people were facing south. That is a change in belief or doctrine that is going to face them the wrong way. So that's where I said, this is not about us leaving our property. This is about a decision we're trying to make. God's saying, here's what it's going to look like if you make this decision the wrong way. So it's got to be, if we're not planning to leave our property, we're not planning to sell the church on Highway 95. Of course, that didn't even show up in here, but the modular did, so church. No plans there at all. What could be done that would totally put us in disfavor with God and open the door to attack and spiritual attack and demonic, and that's what the storm shows? Well, we changed our position, our location on something. When we started the church, we believed this. Now we're going to change our position and location. We're going to believe this. And he's saying, let me show you where this will get you. If you change your position on that, let me show you where that'll get you. So you got your personalized beliefs, doctrinal position that had a direct negative effect on the church, specifically concerning how the church was founded, because it was modular. He didn't show Matt the building we're in now. He went way back to the beginning. He said, here's where you were located in the beginning. Now you're looking to change that. The result of that decision, making the change, was catastrophic to the church. So there are two options of choices. That's the third scene makes that really plain. One is obviously God's best and his favorite. The second is not as good and carries disfavor. Okay, any questions at this point? And don't just start asking. We need you to have the mic, and that way the people who are streaming or watching later can hear your question. Any questions at this point anybody has? Go ahead. Let's see. We're not hearing you. We're going to have you say it again. Is the green light at the bottom on? No. Push this button right here like this. It's a kind of a two deal. And then you do the other one. All right, go ahead.
When you say you missed the dream, it's either God or you missed it. But does underlying circumstances ever happen where you can say, hey, God's all in this, and he can make a way for something else to happen?
Absolutely. But the rest of the dream would have had to play out positive. You know, to where it's like, I'm announcing to the people we're moving. And the rest of the dream just played out really well. Okay. And blessing and prosperity and good things took place. Right. After I made that announcement, everything started going the wrong way. But to answer your question, yeah, it very well. I mean, yeah, God leads us different directions at different times. Anybody else got anything? Right up front.
This might be off the wall, but is there any importance to the fact that Matt dreamed a dream instead of you or Mary?
Yes. And I'll give you the importance to that. He asked me the same question. Because after it was all done, I sent him the interpretation. He went through it, and then we talked on the phone because I wanted to get his input because he was the dreamer, as well as, he's in the church and on the board. And I told him, once I figured out what it applied to, I told him what it applied to. But, so he's a step ahead, and I told him to keep it secret until I let everybody know. But he asked that same question. He said, why did I dream this dream? I said, from my perspective, why did I dream it rather than you? From my perspective, two reasons probably. One is he's on the board, which means he's in a position of authority, and this will affect him if we make the wrong decision here. But the second one is, in helping me decide the things I've been praying about for a number of years, the fact that he dreamt it, had no clue what I was praying about. Nobody knows. Mary knows a little, but she didn't know a lot of it. He had no clue. He dreamt it. Once I got the interpretation, it perfectly fit. And to me, that was just a confirmation, yep, this is God. So that's what I told him. I said, I think you dreamt it to help me help take away any doubt from me. Because it's like, because he said, I couldn't have made that up if I'd have wanted to. I said, no, it's too weird. So, yes, I think that's the answer to that, I think. Anybody else have anything? Okay, let's go into the interpretation. Page 7, we'll start taking it apart. And we won't go real deep, because I want to kind of get through the whole thing tonight, and then we can come back and go deep next week. But I want to show you, again, more in the surface, big picture, how we got to where we got. The thing to realize from the beginning of this interpretation and to remember is that the dream is coming from the perspective that the choices have already been made, and that the choices made were the wrong ones. This is not the way a typical dream lays out, which again, to me, is just a confirmation to me. It's like, because my mind works in details. That's how I'm put together. It's just, I will notice all the details. And it's how my mind operates. And that particular detail is so odd, even in dream language, it just doesn't happen a lot. He takes you to the future and then says, here's where it'll be. If you make the decision back here, here's what the future will play out like. That's odd. In the first two scenes, God is showing the future if the wrong decisions are made. In the third scene, we have two options. One is going to be good. One is going to, if you make the wrong decision or stay with it, that's where you're going to end up. So this is how the interpretation lays out. I will give the portion of the dream. I'll just take it line by line or paragraph by paragraph. The directions of each detail is there, and then the interpretation. And I said that last week, but on the bottom of page 7, so the dream, it says in parentheses, the dream, I just pulled out the first sentence. We were in the modular for a service. The definitions, if you look them up in the book, and that's where I went to the book, and anything that, modular is not in the book, but building, what the modular stands for, I knew that. That wasn't any guess. The modular stood for the church. So I went and looked these things up. This is where the church started for what I would consider for real. We were here to stay once we did that. Because if the way that's set up is if this doesn't work, Mary and I are going down financially. We're going to lose everything. Because we were totally vested personally in the success of this church to get the loan and get the down and make this happen. So from our perspective, this was for real. If this doesn't work, we're going to be selling and leaving because we'll lose it financially. Okay? So the modular was the birthplace and the place of establishing the church. So this dream is definitely about the church. Church meaning congregation may represent one's own church. It may represent the pastor's character. In this dream, it represents both. Because the decisions I made would affect or would flow out of my character, that is shown from the kitchen scene, which we'll see later. Kitchen speaks of the heart, the intent, the motives. It's where you're cooking this thing from. It's kind of the picture. You got everything. It's the starting point of what's being cooked up. The heart, the intent, the motives. Spiritual destination in regard to ministry. Yeah, absolutely. God's showing what's coming if we go the wrong direction. Okay? So we're in the modular. We're having a service. So the church is active. The church hasn't shut down. We're active. We're having service. Dream continued. The building was full. Means the church is doing okay. Definition, it pictures life and health and growth. We're doing okay. We're full. This is not the inception of the church. That's important because the timer is now. Right now, we're coming up in June, we're coming up to 18 years into this thing. So this is not the beginning of the church, this is now. So the fact that it's full, we're having service, it's the first Sunday we had service there, I think we had, in the modular, I think we had 20, 22 people. I don't know, everybody left after we moved from the house to the modular, it scared them all. Because we had services in the house where we were 50 and 60 people. And then we moved to the modular, and the first Sunday is like, where'd everybody go? So it's like, this wasn't the inception of the church. This is into it a ways, okay? Dream continued. Matt standing in the back in the kitchen. Heart's going to be revealed. And I didn't know that until I looked it up, because I didn't remember what kitchen meant. Matt's dealing with the board, the oversight. The kitchen he's in the back. Back means past, something behind. And kitchen is heart, intent, motives, plans, things like that. So we're looking at something from the past in the modular. But the dream is about the future if we make the wrong decision. So God is saying, take the intent of the heart and the motives from back here and drop them in up here. They tie together in the leadership. Starting in the past and moving forward. Things that are going to surface are things of the heart. Bottom of page 8. It was a slightly different layout. The chairs were facing to the south wall and the sanctuary ran north and south. The kitchen setup was slightly different too. So the heart had changed. The kitchen setup was slightly different. The heart had changed. Different details than are in real life because the chairs weren't set that direction. It wasn't set up that way. So it's showing something's changed. Something significant has changed because we've changed the whole posture of the congregation. Different layout. Chairs are facing south. Okay, so you got chairs. Definition there, it's a position. It's a place you settle. It's where you dwell. It's where you're going to remain. It gives you the definitions there of sit out of Strong's Concordance. Facing is future. Back is past. Front is future. Matt's back was to the kitchen. He's facing south. Back means past, in front of you means future in dream language. So now we know we're talking about something of the heart from the past into the future, and the future is pointed the wrong direction. It's set up wrong. We're going the wrong direction. We're going to go down. We're going to go south. It can also mean world or worldly, temptation, corruption, deception. South is not a positive, favorable direction. It's disfavorable. It means to go down, to get into the natural thinking, to go beneath where you were. So we'll look at the interpretation there. This all seems a little odd until the next piece of information comes across. So it's like if you'd stop right there and say, what in the world? Why is the church in its future going to go down? Well, he can only give you so much information at a time, so let's see the next piece. And then it'll make sense. Dream continued, page 10. Vern shared they were moving and that when God moved them here, they had asked for the house. Well, we're already living on this property, and the modular's already on this property, but now all of a sudden we have an epiphany, and the real house God wanted us to have has shown up. And we're going to move. It's a done deal. Telling everybody that. I was wearing a short sleeve, light lime green t-shirt. The color's very vivid, okay? Vern speaks of the pastor or the one who's leading the church. It also speaks of me literally in the dream also, but because I'm literally the one who's pastor and leading the church. T-shirts, any kind of clothing, especially on the upper half of the body, speaks of a covering. You're covered with something. So that, it can be a head covering, it can be a shirt, or it can be a coat covering, that kind of thing. Typically in dreams, it speaks of spiritual covering, but it can speak of other kind of coverings too. Because it's a short sleeve t-shirt, it's indicating the covering is kind of sparse. It's not very good. I'm not very well covered. I don't have a big, thick, heavy sweater on. That would be a heavy covering. I have a very light, much of me is exposed covering. So I'm not covered really well. Light lime green. Lime green is composed, now here you've got a mixture, and that's interesting. It's composed of, green is the majority of it, but red and blue in equal parts in a minority, and depending upon how you mix the red and green and red and blue in, depends upon the shade of lime green you get. It's a mixture color, so now we've got to look at the definitions for all of them and put them together. Green in the negative, because to this point, this is not a positive dream. This scene is not positive, so we're going to interpret this negatively. Green in the negative means a counterfeit or imposter. It means of the flesh or the mortal human being, the carnal side, the temporary state of man's flesh, carnal, envy, inexperienced, immature. Wow, so that's not good. Red, it's coming out of anger, war, destruction. Hatred can be involved. Some kind of sin, lust can be involved. The blue in the negative is depression, pain, suffering, sorrowful. So what I am covered in is not a good spiritual covering. This is bad. So it's like, it's not a heavy covering, but it's covering me. So it's talking about the position I'm speaking out of. So apparently, and to me where my mind went is, I am a strong believer in you have to be under authority. You got to find a way to be under authority. That is just the scriptural, how would you say, foundation that everything flows on. You have to be under authority. I have no use for churches who do not have an authority over them. It's just you're a loose cannon, you're out there doing your own thing, and you can't be trusted because everything in Scripture says we need to be under authority. So should I take that a step deeper? I also don't have a lot of use for people who will not submit themselves to some spiritual authority. You're an independent, you're out there doing your own thing, you can't be trusted because something's broken inside of you that you are unwilling to submit to authority. So therefore, be careful. Well, I've submitted to an authority here. Obviously, it's not Brother Caseman, and by the time you hear the end of what this applies to, then you're going to go, oh, yeah, that's not Caseman. So I've changed authority structures, and I've changed to one that's not good. I'm covered, my covering, that's what it's showing me. My covering is not a good covering. Not good. I'm moving through the people, which means of progress or labor is involved. I'm trying to get something happening here. The movement wasn't about moving a body part like this. I'm not just standing moving my arm. I'm moving through the people. I'm trying to help the people go this new direction because we're changing our property. House represents a person's life or personality. So that's us. It's at our house. It's at our location. So that's us. This is representing Mary and I. It's representing the position we have taken in our life concerning certain subjects. As I was interpreting it, by this point, I hadn't seen that part yet. I didn't see that. It's representing a position we have taken in our own personal lives concerning certain subjects. I didn't see that until I saw the meaning of the old farmhouse. But I put it in here because by the time I wrote this, I had seen it. So, moving location is moving a position we have taken in our life doctrinally or our beliefs. And everything to this point is saying, probably shouldn't have made that choice. We have taken the positions because we felt they were scriptural, and that's why they are also in the church. So we're telling the church people, we're trying to have the church people, move with us. It's the wrong direction, da-da-da-da-da. So jump over to the next page. We'll just go a little bit quickly here. There's a whole thing of interpretation there where the scene is starting to come together, and we can go back over parts of that next week because it goes layers. It kind of just goes deeper and deeper. Go down to the bottom of page 12. Dream continued. Vern asked Matt to go outside and help Dean, who was struggling wrangling up all the kids. Dean does not work in the children's department. Just as an FYI, okay? They were playing in the yard, and one of them was stuck in a big oak tree, and Dean had just got them down. Dean had the whitest sneakers on you could imagine. He borrowed them to go outside, and he couldn't fit into them, so he stepped down the back part of it and walked on them that way, and that's when he noticed there's a storm coming. It was cloudy, and it was gray. Dean is the third of the four elders at Word of Life, and this is the way we have it set up. We started the church. Let me back up and explain this because it plays into the dream. When we started the church, Brother Caseman, and this was back, we're still using the same constitution and everything, incorporation that we had in Colorado. So when we started, I asked Brother Caseman, what's the best way to set this up? He said, I'm going to tell you what Brother Hagan told me. He said, especially when you're starting the church. He said, you put 3 people on your board, 2 of them are you and your wife, and then a third person to make it legal with the IRS. He said, that's all we're trying to do is make it legal with the IRS so they'll give you your incorporation. He said, here's the reason for that. He said, when a church is starting, nobody wants to help you do much of anything. They're all standing back to see if this is for real and will this make it. He said, so there's not going to be any power struggles. There's not going to be any issues with decisions being made by membership that could affect you, this, that, and the other. He said, none of that will happen. He said, you're not facing that. He said, but when you're starting the church, you're the one who's called. You're the one God's going to speak to for how he wants it set up. If you have a board of 5 people, you have to have their approval to do what God asked you to do. He said, don't ever put yourself in that position. If you and your wife are in agreement, even if the third person is going, I don't know, and that happened a few times, we were in agreement. He said, you can still take the church where it's supposed to go, and it'll either succeed or fail on you. Your decisions. But it's a legal way of ensuring you stay the pastor and the one in charge, okay? He says, now, as the church grows and starts succeeding, he said, all of a sudden, people will want input, power, authority, because it's working now. And I've said this numerous times. When we moved up here, my whole income was dependent upon getting a paycheck from the church. That first summer, I said, God, should I drive school bus for the first year or 2 just to make sure we've got income? And he said, you can if you want, but I'd prefer you don't. So it's not a sin issue, it's a favor or disfavor issue. I prefer you don't. So I didn't. Mary was working outside the home. She started as a PCA, was working that for a while and did some different things. So the income was entirely dependent on the church. If we were going to pay our bills, we had to get money from people buying into the vision and saying, yes, let's do this. So as a result, that first part of, okay, we've been in existence now for a year, we've got more people coming than should be in the house. The Isani County was really good, and they kind of just let us do our own thing, but it's a small community, and we're filters back. And the fire department was not happy about having 50 people in a residence. It's not what it's built for. And they were starting to get a little bit edgy. Plus, we didn't, want that many people in the house. So, okay, it's time to do something different. We have no building fund. We're still trying to figure out how we're going to live financially. So there's no building fund. We're just living from hand to mouth yet. There's no bank in the world who's going to borrow you much. Because, so I'm going to put in a plug for our bank right now. We're a year into this. We've lived up here for a year. When we started seriously going after, we got to do something, get out of the house. I went to every bank in Princeton and Cambridge, and every one of them looked at me like, you're nuts. You have no income other than this church. She makes a nominal amount. You have no income? So if this thing fails, everything's going down? Yep, pretty much. We're not interested. We're not buying into this. There was one bank who said, we'll work with you. We're not giving you a lot, but we'll give you enough to get going. That was Cambridge State Bank. Because Ariana asked, why do we bank at Cambridge State Bank? I said, well, because we're being loyal to someone who helped us when nobody else would. So it's like, and they're still, we need money. I just call the banker and say, we need something. And he says, how much you want? No. It's awesome at this point. But at that point, it was like, if we don't find a way to get about $50,000, because we had taken a second mortgage out on our house and kept it clean. So we had access to about $50,000, $60,000 on the second mortgage. But you can't do much with that. We needed another 50. So the banker said, we'll give you the 50 you need, and that's all we're going. I said, come on, that's like a truck loan. Are you serious? That's a nice pickup back then. Pushed, upper 40s. That's all you're going to give me? That's all we're going to give you. I'll be lucky to get this past the board. You're a high risk. It's like, okay, that's fine. So we took everything we could out of our second mortgage. So now our house is totally mortgaged to the hilt. And we found the modular building. It was down in the cities, and we bought it, had enough to get it moved up and get it set up, and now we're having church. Brother Caseman said, nobody is going to complain about how you handle the finances at all at the beginning, because there's nothing there. Nobody wants to have a voice in what we should spend money on. But he says, once you become successful, all of a sudden, everybody's going to be very concerned how pastor's handling the money. And he says, that's when you don't want more than 3 people on the board, because a young church is going to be susceptible to power struggles. Boy, was he right. So when people ask me now, well, who makes the major decisions on the money? I say, I do. I'm the pastor. Oh, I don't know if that's right. Shouldn't the board be making the decisions? That just doesn't seem right. And I said, nobody was concerned about the finances when we borrowed every penny we could borrow to get this thing started. Nobody was concerned about how it was being handled then. So keep your nose out of it now. We must have did okay. And then I'll say something like, the average farmer nowadays has $1 million budget. They're out buying $100,000, $200,000 pieces of machinery. So don't get all upset if there's $200,000 going through the church. We got to make sure pastor doesn't go corrupt. In other words, it's working. We want our hands on it now. And it's like, get your hands off of that. Where was your hands when we needed you? You didn't even stick them in your pocket to pull anything out. You were just kind of standing like this, watching us. So he said, so as the church progresses, I don't know why we're taking this much time on it, but we're taking this much time. He says, as the church progresses, he said, then you can shuffle that board a little bit. He says, but always keep it in a position where they can't vote you out. He says, because the next thing that'll happen, first thing they're going to do is put their hands on the money and dictate how this thing's going to happen. And the next thing they're going to do is you're going to get somebody mad, and they're going to gather support and try to vote you out. And he says, you have poured your lifeblood into it. You are the one who put your life on the line. You're 10, 15 years into this thing, and somebody gets a brainstorm that they could do it better, or they want you out, you offended them, whatever. And he says they're going to try to get you out of the spot. He says, don't ever get yourself in a governmental position. He says, because they'll kick you out. That would have happened twice already. So we have the board set up in this way. It's Mary and I and Dean. Dean we each have one vote. And then we have Dave and Kevin and Matt, who those three have the fourth vote. So we've got a good number of representation, but the worst thing that can happen is it's 2 against 2, vote-wise. Dean is significant in that he carries a vote all by himself. In this dream, it's like, so this is directly affecting a heavy part of church leadership. Whatever decisions Mary and I are going to make are going to have a direct, heavy effect on church leadership. And it's going to affect the kids, the next generation. And you say, well, why would Dean go deal with the kids? Because Dean is part of the leadership. He's not part of the children's ministry, so it's really odd that he would go out there and deal with it. So our decisions, Mary and I, that affect the leadership, through the leadership going along with it, will affect the next generation. See how that picture opens up? The yard means worship. Children, obviously, people who are alive now, but also the next generation. Oak tree on page 13 is a person or a covering. It's a strong shelter. It's a leader. So the children, they were playing in the oak tree. One of them got caught up there. The leader had to go out and help get them down. A storm is coming. It was one oak tree, so this is something beginning. This is new. So again, he's reaffirming the fact this is a new direction. The congregation's facing south, hasn't done that before. We have one tree outside. This is something new that's happening. This is a beginning of something. Getting them out of the oak tree, removing them from the covering or the strong shelter. Even though they were stuck up there, the oak tree means a covering or a strong shelter. So the picture is, by changing the direction of the congregation, we're taking the next generation out of its place of protection, safety, shelter. We're bringing them down out of it. We should leave them stuck where they're at because it's a good place to be, but we're bringing them down out of it. White is deception. Shoes, sneakers wasn't in my book, but shoes is. Gospel, covenant, preparation. So he is putting something on his feet that has to do with preparation, the gospel or the words of the word covenant. That is a deception. He's wearing a deception. Feet shod with the preparation of peace. He has found a way to come to peace with where Mary and I are trying to go. Which to me, it's like, that just reaffirms to me, we have to be really careful the direction we're going to go, because the people are going to try to support where we're going. And if we're wrong, they're going to be wrong. And they're going to be as deceived as we are. That was the white shoes. They were new shoes, so again, here it said again, This is the beginning of something. This is something new. The oak tree, only one oak tree, that's the beginning, something new. The sanctuary facing south, that's something new. New shoes. They weren't old white shoes. They were brand new white shoes. A new ministry or way of life. So everything is starting. You started to, what the message is at this point, you started to go someplace new. This is a new location you're going to, and it's not good. All the little details are saying this is not good. The yard pictures our personal lives, our personal stance, our posture. Matt also tried to get into peace with whatever we were leading towards. He had to force himself to do it because he didn't fit. The sky, now here we're talking spirit realm, heavenlies, that covering, spiritual atmosphere. It's a large indicator of what is going on in the spirit realm over our property and the modular, or the church. It's crucial in helping establish the context. So 3 times we were told, you're doing something new now. And all the details are saying whatever you're doing new is not good. As a result of that new, we have new spiritual activity going on. That is not good. It's bad spiritual atmosphere that is forming and taking place. Gray means confused, deceived, deception. Second time deception is brought up. It's brought up first time in Dean's shoes. So now not only is he, Mary and I are leading him in a position of standing at a point of he's deceived, but now the spirit realm's going to come and try to add to that deception. Stormy, it's a disturbance, obviously, a disturbance in the force, so to speak, if you're a Star Wars fan. It's spiritual warfare. It's a change. Windy, spirit or doctrine. Oh. Therefore, the wind can mean the spirit of a doctrine. So something has changed in Mary and I's personal stance that now is conducive to a new spiritual doctrine. That's my first hint to what the farmhouse is about. Oh. So these spiritual forces are beginning to churn and draw near to us, and this is a doctrine that's drawing them. Of course, southeast, south being the predominant here, bad direction. East, 4th time this is mentioned. The word east means beginning or new birth, starting something new. So he's saying over and over and over, you started something new. And all the details built around that are wrong. So that kind of you can read through that interpretation, which you probably have. We're just going to skip it for tonight. We'll come back and go more depth next week. I just want to see if we can get all the way through this. So page 16. So Matt went inside again. He saw the storm. I was walking among the people, praying in tongues, and he was making his way back to me. He got next to me and said, and I is the he there. I got next to Matt, and I said, I have your back. And Heidi was there praying for someone. That phrase really disturbed me. Because we're in the middle of a negative, bad decisions. Matt is trying to get peace on this, the white shoes. It's just not fitting right to him. He's not setting right in it. That's the second time. First time was, why are you changing property? The property seems okay to me. Now he's trying to get into shoes that are not fitting him. So in order to follow where we're going, he's having to force himself. This is not a natural, I feel good about this kind of flow. He comes back in, and I'm walking amongst the people trying to, gather direction and talking to people and so forth. We're praying, and I come back to him and I say, I've got your back. That is horrible. And he brought it up when we were discussing the dream. Because I asked him, I said, what is your definition of I have your back? Because he had the dream. I can't define that. He has to define that. It means this on the bottom of page 16. He said, simply put, that they would be there or I would be there to support him when he's going through a tough time. And I thought, oh, man. After he gave me that, what was his tough time in the dream? He doesn't have peace over this. He's forcing himself to take the posture, the stance he's taking. He doesn't like this. Something's wrong.
Because he cares for you.
Yeah? And the church. Yeah. So while he's in a position of struggling to support me, I come up to him and say, I got your back. He said, why do you think in the dream you told me that? I said, to manipulate you. There is no other reason to make that statement. I'm trying to encourage you in something you're not comfortable in. So come on, man, I'll walk this out with you. It's horrible. I told him, I said, I didn't even have the dream. I'm embarrassed. It's like, what did I say that for? Read on. Scene 2, bottom of page 17. Next thing I know, Mary's in the kitchen. They're looking, her and Matt, looking to the southeast, looking at the storm, the circling clouds. He says, we need to deal with that. So she comes out and gets the people praying out the wrong direction and facing towards the southwest. Page 18, definitions. Mary, well, she's one of the pastors. She's also my wife, so it applies to both the church and our property, the decision we're going to make about our own personal stance. She's also on the board, so, you know, there's numerous applications there. Kitchen, heart, and intent, motive, because they were standing in the kitchen looking to the southeast. Again, the beginning, the new. Window means reveal truth or revelation. Something is trying to be exposed here. What were they? They were looking to the southeast, out the window, kitchen. They're in the kitchen, so the heart, the motives, is they're looking out of. Window means revelation. I want you to, God is saying, I want you to see something. I want it to come alive to you, be illuminated, revealed. You can see it. The storm. The spiritual atmosphere is changing, and it's going to get on you, and it's going to damage everything. That's what he's trying to show here. She comes, takes the people, looks out the other direction, and we got the definitions of that. Interpretation, very quickly on page 19, middle paragraph. Looking out the southwest window when the storm was to the southeast and having the people pray that direction when the problem is actually the other direction is showing one of two things: intentional misdirection and misguidance on the parts of the pastor. Well, it's showing that, but the question is, why was it there? If Mary and I make this move, this change in our own personal lives, the location of our doctrine, our beliefs, then lead the church that direction, one of two things happen to her. We will either enter into such deception and false doctrine that we will actually believe it's okay and try to lead the people into it by praying, the wrong direction. So either we are deceived, or we are, because we made this doctrinal change, we become so corrupt, we know exactly what we're doing, but we're misdirecting them. Page 19, the bottom. Just then the sirens went off. Everybody headed out. Heidi took Isla. He got his keys and phone, looked for Grant, ended up out in the yard trying to find a place to hide because a tornado's coming. So just go down to the interpretation, bottom of page 20. Now the storm is hitting. This is going to be the result of planning and moving toward going to the new property. The decision to do that placed us in the wrong spiritual atmosphere, and we lost our protection and covering. We're under a new covering. My shirt was that, the spiritual atmosphere, the clouds, the storm is that, and none of it's good. Second paragraph, the church people will be dispersed into seeking refuge in a place that has the same position, our yard, doctrines, positions, stance, beliefs, we had when we started our church property. So when they were driven out of the modular, what it's saying is they're going to leave the church. And they're going to try to find refuge in what your yard represents, which was, that's where we started it. So they're going to try to find refuge in the beliefs and doctrines that you had when you began. But they will leave the church. They're being driven out by the spiritual atmosphere, the storm. tornado, the spiritual storm, the tornado being unleashed against the church. So then you've got scene 3, which is the decision scene. Our property was on a dirt road. We read that all. So let's go to the definitions of that on page 21. There's 2 options here. The first option is the road, which was dirt. It was running north and south, had cornfields, an old house, and oak tree and forest, and everything was green. He was looking to the east, which is this is a new. You gotta make a choice here on this, and it'll start new right now. The road is an opportunity for movement or change. It's a direction or path in life. You can either go north or you can go south on this road. It denotes your life's work, and this came out of the book. All of this stuff there in the definitions came out of the book. It denotes your life's work, your ministry, where you're at, or what is going on with it, or coming. So this road speaks specifically of Mary and I. And we can go north or we can go south with this decision, but we have to make a decision. Dirt, by the setting of what this is, we know the road has been there a long time. There's an old farmhouse, a big oak tree. Oak trees grow slowly. There's a forest. Forests grow slowly. Everything there speaks of it's been there a long time. The dirt part lets us know it's an old road. It leads back. Anything old almost always speaks of generational ancestry. Almost always. So anytime you're dealing with an old building, an old church, in whatever's old, here we have an old road and an old farmhouse, an old oak tree. The corn, he describes it later, it was golden, and he thought it was because of the setting sun. He said, but it could also have been ripe. And then the sunshine on it made it look gold because you got tan leaves. So the corn was old for the life age of a corn. So everything on that side of the road is speaking of old. Old almost always speaks of ancestral or generational. North and south, well, that's kind of self-explanatory. Which way are you going to go? It's going to be good or it's going to be bad. Corn, this is interesting, it represents the blessings of God. I didn't know that until I looked it up. It's like, I wonder what corn means. Well, it means the blessings of God. The color gold, which means an abundance of the color of the blessings and the golden corn, and this is really good. The field of corn, in the positive, Psalms 23, it's a place of beauty, rest, growth. So it's everything to the east now is actually, it's old, but we're starting to get the picture this could be good. Except you got that old, white, worn-down farmhouse. And I kind of picture it in my mind like an old farmhouse that needed paint. So I got a hold of him. I said, what did the farmhouse look like? He said, give me a second. And he just stepped back into the memory of the dream. He said, this is what it looks like. It's, where did he describe it? Maybe I didn't put that in here. He said, the windows are broken out. It absolutely needs paint. The roof needs reshingling. There's bare spots on the roof. He said it looks bad. I'm going, oh, man. What in the world does this mean? Because here we go. What is this? Old means wisdom, experience, generational, or ancestral. White, in the positive, means purity without mixture, unblemished, spotless, righteous, blameless innocence. Of course, in the negative, it means deception and goes down that road. But this scene, okay, so is there anything negative in this scene? Everything seems to be positive in this scene, except it's all indicating something old. But it's still positive. So let's go with the positive interpretation, is how I went with it. So, okay, purity. Worn down represents its age. It's been around a long time. It's been through a lot. It's been, to go a little deeper into what he saw, it's been neglected. It's not been kept up. It's the roof needs shingling, the windows need replacing, it needs paint. It's a mess. It's been neglected. It's not been kept up. But it's old. It's old wisdom. That is positive wisdom. but it's being neglected. Okay? Old house, past inheritance. Now, notice this. When I read this, I went, oh, now I got it. One's grandfather's or grandmother's religion, their ways, or established traditions. An old house in bad condition, our sins are the sins of the forefathers. It's needing revival, or it's needing to be revived when it's in need of repair or remodeling, which this one was. So the wisdom of the ancestors, which has been neglected, needs to be revived and brought back to life. I read that, and I started to cry. There was my answer to what I had been praying for. It just went, doop, I see it. And now everything came together. Oak tree, person or covering, strong shelter, leader. So that's good. Forest, group, a large number of trees. A tree is a person, a covering, a leader, a shelter. It was green. It speaks of life. It's summertime, renewal, the color green in the positive, life, renewal, prosperity, growth, all good. Fields to the west. Well, right, if we make, you're standing east, if we decide to choose to go the right direction, which is pictured by, okay, we would go north. All kinds of good things are going to happen, but you have to revive that old house. You got to bring that old house back to life. And then there's going to be abundance. The corn is gold. There's lots of it. The forest is green. Trees speak of people and covering. There's lots of people, lots of green, life, all kinds of good things. But if, again, coming to the first thing, the road, if you choose to go south on that road, now we get what was west of the modular, which was open fields, rolling open fields, which is really not a bad thing. But when you compare empty open fields to what this is, it's like, oh, this is much better on the east side than on the west. I mean, it's not bad, but it's, you know what it is? It's starting over. Plug that back in with the end of the last scene. Everybody left the church. So you can go that direction if you want, but you're starting over. You're going to have to plant and water and cultivate and grow crops. And eventually you'll get to corn and trees again. That's in the distance in the dream. He says, so whatever you need to make a decision on, if you make the wrong one, this is how it's going to play out. If you make the right one, everything east of the road, of course, you got to do something. And that is pictured in the old house. You got to do something. You have to restore that old farmhouse. Then everything east of the road will be great. If you choose not to do that and pick the other direction, go south, you'll end up getting what you got on the west, which isn't hell. You're not losing your salvation. And then this is what the Holy Spirit said to me. When I saw all that, he said this, look at this from what the first picture was in the sanctuary. Look at this from the perspective of something God favors or God disfavors. And then he ran this scripture through my mind. It's John 15. No, John 17, I believe. Jesus is praying to the Father, and the scripture says this about him, and we can look it up. We're at the end of time, so I don't know if you have questions or not, but I'll just say this much. It says that in Jesus, in helping us, Jesus sanctified himself in order to help us. Sanctification is typically a word applied to sin. Jesus never sinned. So what did he have to be sanctified of? I'm still not sure I have the answer to that. It wasn't an issue of Jesus going to sin or Jesus is not going to sin. If he's not going to sin, he needs to get sanctified. No, Jesus never did sin. That wasn't the issue. But even though he was walking sinless, there was still a sanctification process that had to happen in him. Now, I don't know exactly what that meant, what he personally had to live out. But after this dream and what the Holy Spirit said, I can tell you what it means in the big picture. There is the level of sanctification where God's saying, that's sin, don't do it. This is righteousness, do it. And that's where most Christians live. If we want to go a deeper level, you have the things that are not necessarily sin, but God still doesn't favor you doing them. If you do them, you're still headed south spiritually. Not necessarily in sin, but they're not going to uplift you and grow you. They're going to take you down. Well, I'm not in sin. Granted, you're not, but you need to sanctify yourself of those. That plays in with what I was praying about. So, any questions at this point? There's the big quick overview. We hit a lot of details. We can go back. There's layers of stuff, but it's all going to just come and support what this was about. The big picture you've just seen, it's all going to come and support. And like I said at the end of the interpretation, last page, I said the big question is, well, what in the world were you praying about? Yeah, that is the big question. I don't know if I should tell you or not. I've been kind of feeling this out all evening, if I should or I shouldn't. And I'm still kind of on the fence. So if I do it, I'll do it next week. I won't do it tonight. I want to get a good feeling on this. Because I'm pretty sure on Palm Sunday, we're going over the dream in a general way, kind of like we did the Sandra Bullock dream. We're just going to blow through it real quick and kind of give people the feel of, okay, this is what God said. And then on Resurrection Sunday, we're going to say, and this is what he was talking about. Because this is what I was praying about. And I don't know if I want to release the thunder of that before I get to that Sunday. Even though that's a month out yet. I know I do. I know I do. Yeah, I bet. Any questions? Okay, over here. Can we get the mic over to her so that whoever's streaming with us can hear the question?
I'm just wondering, when did he have this dream? It sounds like it was just like
He had this
yesterday,
dream.
very
There's a date in
recently?
here someplace. I think it's on 12/31, so the last day of last year. So it was fairly recent. Pardon me? There might be. I haven't dug into it. There could be. I didn't get a hold of it until into February. He kind of just sat on it. Because he wasn't convinced this was God. But that's when he had it. Any other questions? Right here.
Are you convinced it's from God to you?
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. And once you hear what I was praying about, the things I was praying about are not, I'll give you this much. I'll give you this much. I am not going to change, Mary and I are not going to change our belief, position, or location on what we know is godly or ungodly righteousness or sin. Not going to change on that. The things I was praying about are the disfavor things or favor things. Does God favor this or does God disfavor this? Is this okay for Christians? Is this not okay for Christians? What about these things? What do we do with these things? You say, why would you be praying about that? Well, I can tell you that too. I won't hurt anything. Because I'm concerned I'm going to be a dinosaur. our culture is changing. Society is changing. And there's a reason that old farmhouse is neglected, broken down, and in disrepair. Because even though there's wisdom back there in the generations, it's not being observed now. Does it need to be? We're living in a different society. We're living in a different world. We're living in a whole different way. I mean, move on. Get into the 21st century. But he's saying you need to revive that old house if you want what's on the east side of the road. If you don't revive that old house, this is what you'll have, because you'll have made the wrong decision. The question was, does that have something to do with when it talks about redigging the well? You're talking an Old Testament reference to redigging the well? Okay. Prophets talking about redigging the well and so forth. I don't know what God's telling them. It could play in with it. I don't know what he's telling them, though. He didn't present it to me that way. He presented to me, I need to rebuild the old house. Revive the old house. Get it back in shape again. Which is an ancestral thing. So it's like, interesting. But it answered all my questions. So, long story short, we're not moving to a new location. We're not going down that direction. That ends badly. All right. If you want, we can discuss more on the details of that. But like I said, all it does is just add more color and flavor to what you already see now. It just props it up more and more and more. We can do that next week, or I have another dream that is very simple. You don't even need to take it home and read it. You'll look at it in 2 minutes. You'll have it in your head that we can go into and start interpreting. It's somebody else's dream they gave to me. And we can go after that. So we'll decide that next week. So we good for tonight? All right. Good night. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us by live stream. Good night.